Luigi may have avoided a life sentence here. We're going to get into that today. We go over the United Healthcare case on the legal mindset. We teach you to be your own judge. I'm Andrew Esquire, American attorney. Now, this has been a case that everyone is paying attention to, the United Healthcare case. But in case you need some background, give some facts, here is Luigi Mangione. He is the suspect in this case. This case was over an incident a while back in 2024. Where United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was found deceased, and Luigi Mangione was arrested with a 3D printed handgun that matched the type of quote-unquote ghost gun that would have been used in the incident, with a suppressor, also notes that criticized the healthcare system, fake ID cards. And at that time, he was charged in both the federal court and in the state court, state of New York, for suspicion of this crime. So what happened? Well, we had this procedure where the U.S. District Court judge dismissed in January of 2026, dismissed the murder charges and firearm charges on technical grounds at the federal level. Now, there were still charges going on at the state level, mind you, that's very important here, but at the federal level, those charges went. So the only thing left were stalking charges, and those did not carry the death penalty. There's no death penalty for federal stalking. Now, the state case on the other charges, including the homicide charge, was set for September of 2026, and that carried a charge of second-degree murder and weapons offenses. But now we have a change in the game with a confession and a plea deal. So in his confession in open court, Luigi admitted to planning the attack, traveling to New York with the intent to shoot Thompson using the 3D printed saying, I shot him in Manhattan and he died, and I knew what I was doing was illegal. So a very clear confession there to the crime. The plea was a plea to 2 federal stalking charges. There was no formal plea deal. So the prosecutors and him did not come to this deal. He just essentially is pleading guilty and putting himself at the mercy of the court and what the sentencing would be. In fact, the prosecutors, the federal prosecutors, have said they are seeking the maximum penalty, which is life here. But unfortunately for those prosecutors, as much as they may want life, the guidelines, which typically are followed here, set around 24 to 30 years. So not exactly the lining up with a life sentence. And generally that requires about 85% to be served with no parole. The important thing for Luigi, though, is he immediately after this plea deal moved to dismiss the New York state charges on the basis of double jeopardy. So today, the key word and the key phrase, legal phrase you guys learned is double jeopardy. And double jeopardy, very, very simply, is prosecution of a person for a second time for the same offense. Now, under our Constitution, Fifth Amendment, that's a big no-no. You cannot prosecute somebody for the same charge once again if they've already been gone through the process for that charge. So, for example, if someone stole something, you can't prosecute them twice just because you didn't like how it came out in the first case. That's double jeopardy. And so there's a real question here, as there was a federal case going on and a state case going on, does double jeopardy apply, and are those state charges knocked out? And that's a real question of law, which actually requires us lawyers to think a little bit. So let's walk through it today. So in Luigi's defense, the New York law provides this broad, equitable double jeopardy protection. So states can provide higher levels of protection than the federal level, and that's something that you see in the New York state law. And it pretty much bars any New York prosecution for offenses arising from the same criminal transaction or action or occurrence. So essentially saying if these things came from the same root incident, you cannot be tried twice for them. And this includes federal crimes. So for example, if someone's already gone through that same criminal prosecution for that one incident at the federal level, you cannot bring that again at the state level in New York. But there's a real question here. Now, these are around the same core facts. This United Healthcare CEO's death, that's kind of the whole general thing, but the prosecution will have a different point. First of all, they'll point out dual sovereignty, which is the point that the federal government and the state government are separate, and the federal government and state government can prosecute separately. But the federal claims they're going to argue center around stalking and interstate stalking. And that's what they're going to argue their case is about, and saying that the state case is really the one about the murder and the firearms charges. So they're going to try to break those out into two different things and say, hey, stalking was one thing over here, but the firearms charges, that's separate over here, and saying that, hey, double jeopardy does not apply here and the state can proceed. So in judgment, I think Luigi did make a smart move here in his defense attorneys by avoiding potential double life sentences. He could end up getting a life sentence, something near a life sentence in the federal court and then getting another life sentence in state court. So kind of getting that double life there. He does avoid that by going through this process by kind of pleading. And obviously, if they follow those guidelines, he might get a little bit less, right? So he might be looking at 2 decades, for example. And that was a pretty good use of that defense of double jeopardy. However, it's not clear it's going to work. And even if it does, and even if it does knock those out, he's still facing significant time in the system, even on the federal charges alone. So just on those federal charges alone, he's looking at maybe 2 decades, which is significant amount of time. We will be monitoring this case as it goes out. Sentencing will be in the future, and we'll see how this goes. I don't know what you guys think of the United Healthcare case. If you have any crazy conspiracy theories or other crazy stuff, drop it in the comments. I love to see that stuff, and I will catch you guys on the next one.